right, welcome to our third segment in the Power Autonomy Biosphere Rule. And now we're going to start looking at power autonomous applications in production facilities, in production plants, and in production processes. Both of these are very important if we're going to move towards a viable closed loop system based on the Biosphere rules. So we already seen this examples of these power autonomous facilities emerging. They are emerging principally in service sectors, right? Not industrial sectors, but in service sectors, things like finance, things like insurance, things of those nature. This is a typical example. You can already find, if you look around, you can find many examples of these. This is a bank branch, right? And the bank branch has been designed to be power autonomous. It's power and energy neutral. It generates as much or more of its energy needs on a daily basis. And how is it done? Well, remember what we talked about, generation, efficiency, and storage. Primarily, it's efficiency and generation here. What they they designed the building in such a way that it was 50% more energy efficient than local code requires. I believe this is in Florida. And you can see, some of the elements here. It's obviously highly insulated, but there's lots of glass there, right? The glass lets in lots of natural light. So you don't need to plug your light bulb, your light fixtures into an energy socket. You don't need those because you're generating and using natural light coming in. Second of all, it's the systems within the bank are very efficient. The computers and such, they first of all very efficient, energy efficient computers are chosen, and then use information technology to shut them down in the evening, to power them down. This is not rocket science. I mean, a lot of this technology just is right off the shelf. And then the other piece is that on the southern facing walls are solar panels. The roofing is made of solar panels, and that generates more than enough energy to power the bank during a typical day. So this technology is here and ready, available, and can be broadly applicable in many service industries. And we also now begin to see some of these similar things move into more traditional manufacturing or into the manufacturing sector. And one place where this type of work is actually almost a point of competition is in the high-tech sector. This is an example of a manufacturing plant, an Apple manufacturing plant located in Arizona, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. It's powered by 100% renewable energy. You can see the solar panels cover the full surface of the manufacturing facility itself, plus the parking areas down below. So this is another example now where this is already feasible for at least in this high-tech electronics manufacturing for the type of manufacturing Apple is doing here. So this is not limited only to their manufacturing facilities. We're seeing interesting competition amongst these high-tech companies, especially in terms of cloud computing. So you see Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, all of them pledging and working as quickly as possible to set up their data centers. The data centers are the basis of cloud computing, where all those servers are. So that they are run on renewable energy, and they're making these commitments and they're moving towards that. So the cloud computing can actually be considered carbon neutral or renewable energy powered. So there's a number of examples, and this is happening already, and there's opportunities to accelerate this. And there's a number of broadening commitments. This is a Renewable Energy 100. It's companies that have committed publicly and collectively to move their entire businesses towards 100% renewable energy. And there's some big names in here. You have IKEA, you have Walmart, you have General Motors, you have Procter & Gamble. So a lot of these companies, this is actually going mainstream, the movement towards 100% renewable energy. And by incorporating these ideas of power autonomy, by greater energy efficiency, by careful choices in generation, and increasingly opportunities for storage, more and more organizations, more and more companies in the service sector and sort of consumer goods have been able to move towards this. Okay, the other challenge though is if we're talking about a circular economy, in the context of a circular economy, we need production processes that can take back end-of-life products and recycle them back into new high-value products. We don't want to be downcycling these materials. We want them to come back to higher or better use. Now, the truth is, if you throw enough energy at something, you can recycle almost anything, you know. And an example of this is an experiment in the late 1980s, early 1990s, a company called Molten Metal. And so Molten Metal was based in Massachusetts, and their idea was they were going to create this CEP reactor, catalytic extractive processing reactor. And what they would do is they would feed these industrial chemicals, industrial waste materials into that reactor. And basically what that reactor was filled with, which was, as the name says, molten metal. You basically had a 3,000 degree bath of melted lava effectively in there. And what that did is, with that much energy, you broke all the chemical bonds of these materials coming in, and then they could be recombined into high-grade industrial inputs. And so you could, after you broke it apart, you could recombine them and turn them back into really high-grade industrial inputs, which, you know, is great. That's it would be theoretically a nice example of a circular closed-loop economy. The problem is it's ignoring the power autonomy principle, because it required huge amounts of energy to get the molten metal bath up to that temperature, 3,000 degrees. And what might have worked well at sort of bench scale in the laboratory was much more expensive, not nearly as cost effective, and much more complicated to do at an industrial scale. And ultimately, within 5 years, this company was bankrupt. And the real problem was, they weren't trying to emulate what happens in the biosphere. Actually, what they were doing was they were emulating what happens in the geosphere. This is geomimicry, as if you've probably seen in my other videos. What they were trying to do is replicate the same forces that occur on planet Earth, only deep, deep, deep miles or kilometers below the surface of the planet. The temperatures and pressures that will melt rock, that will melt metal, only occur naturally on the Earth at great depth, all right? And trying to replicate them up here on the surface requires huge amounts of energy and has real questions about safety concerns and environmental consequences. So if we are going to start looking about processes that can recycle products, we need them to also function on the power autonomy principle. They have to be able to function using renewable energy, using non-fossil fuel based energy sources. So that, and as we'll see, that has important consequences for the types of materials we are choosing, for the types of manufacturing processes we are employing as we recycle those products. And right now, many of our processes that we use for recycling, or that we use for, you know, regenerating materials, are still industrial. They are still highly energy intense, and they are not necessarily the optimum ones that we need for a viable, environmentally sustainable, you know, closed loop manufacturing process. And I'll just leave it there. And I'm just going to give you some examples, though. There are examples of industrial processes now that are beginning to tap into renewable energies to achieve what before had to be done using fossil fuels. All right. So an example of this is Frito-Lay's SunChips brand. Okay, and SunChips, with a name like that, you better be solar powered nowadays, right? And what SunChips has done is they've retrofitted existing facilities. This one's in California, but they have another one in Arizona. And what they've set up are these these solar concentrating solar systems that capture and concentrate the sun's energy to heat up water to create steam. And so they're creating steam not with fossil fuels, but using the power of the sun. And then that steam, which is really important to the manufacturing process of SunChips, is then piped into the production facility, right? And so they have a renewable powered steam generation system that allows them to produce these potato chips and allows them to get away from the dependence on fossil fuels. So there are other examples of this, and we're going to have to be, we're going to have to be rethinking the way we go about manufacturing, the way we think about manufacturing. And luckily, there are some emerging new technological, new production processes that hold real promise, I believe, for the circular economy. And just to give you a really interesting example of how these things might begin to work is the Solar Center project. This is a German, Mr. Kaiser. He's a German artist and inventor and creator, and he created something known as the Solar Center. And this is really a portable manufacturing facility that is power autonomous. It does not require any external energy source. And he took it to the Moroccan desert. And the reason he took it to the Moroccan desert is because the Moroccan desert is rich in the natural resources needed for this production process. First of all, it has lots of sun, and this thing is solar powered. It uses a combination of photoelectric cells, as you can see here, to run the motors and the processes that actually move the production process around. It also uses a solar concentrator. Basically, this is like a giant magnifying glass that concentrates the sun's heat. And all of this is run completely off solar power. And what he does is, this is a highly sophisticated system that basically uses the sun's power to focus the sunlight like a laser that allows it then to melt the sand, right? And really, it's uses a similar process to 3D printing, building up the product from the bottom up, piece by piece, and producing beautiful artistic products like this. These are basically glass bowls made out of sand, right? And he did this more as an experiment, more as an art project, more as a science project, but it points to a manufacturing process that's far more similar to the biosphere than the ones we currently operating. The biosphere assembles products from the bottom up, molecule by molecule. It builds up an organism, right? This is similar. You know, sand grain by sand grain, we build these products from the bottom up using this process. And again, this is a perfect example of a power autonomous, closed loop, circular economy system that in many ways follows the biosphere rules. And the other version of this, where this same type of thing is occurring, is in 3D printing. And you're starting to see now a number of examples of portable solar-powered 3D printers that are first being experimented and tested with in laboratories and in universities. There's a number of really good university programs that are developing in these applications, and then actually beginning to see it applied not just in the industrial world, but actually in the developing world. This type of technology allows you to bring manufacturing to villages that don't have electricity, right? And this type of technology allows you to manufacture things like prosthetic limbs for someone in the village who lost their limb, or medical supports and the like. You can manufacture them custom fit on site in say a village in a remote part of Africa or Latin America or Asia or other parts of the world. And it's these types of approaches to manufacturing processes that I think are the most promising for closed loop and circular economy approaches. And I've talked about this extensively, as you may have read in articles and journal articles and other places, the possibility that 3D printing technology is going to form the infrastructure, the foundation for our closed loop, or if not all, for much of the closed loop manufacturing that will emerge in the future. All right, so that was facilities and production processes. In the next video, we'll talk about power autonomous products, so that you generate power autonomy on the use end of the product when it's in the user's hands. All right, so we'll see you in the next video.